Story time about how my asshole boyfriend criticizes everything I wear. Disclaimer's not my story time. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 6 months. We're both pretty young. I'm 19 and he's 22. I could say that he's just young and he doesn't know how to treat a woman yet, but he's pretty immature in everything else. Now you might wonder why I'm with him. It's because I love him. I met him when I was 15 in high school and I've been in love with him ever since. He always used to tell me that I was too young for him, but finally when I turned 18, he started paying attention to me. I begged him to go on a date with me and he finally said yes. At first, everything was so amazing. He was fun, charismatic, and super affectionate. When he finally asked me to be his girlfriend, I was so happy. But then slowly he started criticizing everything I wear. He doesn't like when I wear hoodies or sweaters, leggings or pants, skirts that are too short, skirts that are too loose, or crop tops. First he would politely say things, but now he's just straight up mean about it. He told me when I'm around him I can wear skimpy clothes, but when we go out he wants me to wear stuff that's loose. So I literally changed everything I wore. I dressed only for him and I started hating myself. Part 2 of how my boyfriend criticizes everything I wear. Disclaimers are not my story time, send me on Instagram. I completely changed the way I dress just for him. He would always find something to criticize, even down to the jewelry or hair accessories or makeup that I wore. It got to the point where if I went shopping, I would send him pictures of the stuff that I wanted to buy for him to approve. Even my nails. Anytime I went to the nail salon, I would have to send him pictures of the nail polish or any designs I wanted to do. And don't think that he's paying for stuff. No, he's not. I finally opened up to my mom and told her everything. She told my dad and they both got really upset. My dad even called my boyfriend and told him to come over. My parents told him to stop being so controlling, otherwise the relationship would be over. Of course, my boyfriend pretended to be on his best behavior, apologized and said that he wouldn't do it anymore. But when we left my parents' house, he told me I was a snitch. Then he made me promise to never tell my parents anything about our relationship again. And I know I should just break up with him, but I do love him. I've been in love with him for years, and now that I'm with him, I don't want to lose him. But I know that I've put him up on a pedestal. It's been a few weeks since my parents intervened, but my boyfriend hasn't changed a thing. I decided to buy myself a designer purse that I've been wanting for years. As soon as he saw me with the purse, he said that my privilege was showing, and that I needed to go return it as soon as possible because it was embarrassing. Part 3 of how my boyfriend criticizes everything I wear. Disclaimers is not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. After he told me to return the designer purse, I said no. He then explained to me why I should be embarrassed to wear it. He said people that buy designer stuff are only trying to flaunt their wealth, and that people who do that are just trying to cover up their shortcomings. So basically, I'm trying to hide the fact that I'm not good at other things, or that I don't have good qualities. I couldn't believe what he was saying to me. For the first time ever, I defended myself and I told him he needed to leave me alone. And no, I didn't return the purse, and I'm not trying to flaunt my wealth either. So here's what I did. I started returning all the clothes that I bought just to wear for him, and the ones he wants me to wear in front of other people. When he saw me again, he told me that I looked terrible. He said no one would take me seriously in my outfit with my designer purse. So I drove him back to his house because no, he doesn't have a car, and I've been ignoring his calls and messages for 4 days. My plan is to start treating him the way he treated me. I'm gonna control and criticize everything he wears and see how he likes it. I think this is gonna make things better. I don't want to break up with him because I do love him. What do you guys think?
I'm an asshole for keeping a dog when my ex and I broke up. My ex and I got a dog together a year before we broke up. And when we decided to break up, we didn't talk about who would get the dog. I would have assumed that I would, because I'm home more, and I'm the one taking care of the dog most of the time. Well, when I moved out, I just kind of took the dog and didn't say anything. I get a text later that day, asking if I knew that the dog ran away, or if I have him. I texted him saying that I have him, and that he's okay, and my ex got really mad at me, and now is even threatening to go to court for him, saying that it's his dog. He did pay for the dog, but I do everything else and pay for all the dog's necessities. So, was I the asshole?
Story time about the time that I had a thing with my stepbrother. So a little background information. I was 14 and it was the first half of my freshman year. So my dad had recently broken up with my mom and he had different girls in and out of the house 24/7. I mean, he was kind of doing his thing after a 15-year marriage. Well, the one day I'm sitting in the house and he brings this girl Kayla over. She had a few kids herself, but both of them said that they would never date. Well, I thought her son Tyler was extremely good looking. So him and I started talking over Snapchat, and things were going good for quite a while. Well, I would say a few months later, my dad told us that Kayla was coming over with her kids. And I was super confused because he seemed really nervous about it. So her kids and I were all sitting on the sofa, and they sat us down and they were like, we need to talk to you guys. We're gonna call my dad Mike. She goes, Mike and I are dating now, so we all have to get along. The reason why she said that was because she thought that I didn't get along. Part 2 about how I had a thing with my stepbrother. So like I said, my dad and her sat us down and she goes, Mike and I are dating now, da-da-da-da-da. And she was like, so we all have to get along now. Because she thought that I didn't get along with some of her kids and her kids did not respect my dad at all. So like I said, Tyler and I were dating at this point. And I freaked out. I was like, you guys can't start dating because Tyler and I are dating. And Kayla was like, well, that's too bad. You two need to break up because I'm your new mother now. And I'm sitting there like, what the fuck did this bitch say? So I start screaming that it's not fair. Tyler's trying to calm me down. My dad is trying to calm Kayla down. To be honest, my dad didn't really care because I had told him about Tyler and I before the whole situation. I thought Tyler would be really upset at the situation, but he was actually pissed off at his mom. So we broke up. Kayla and my dad dated for a little bit over 2 months. Well, surprise, surprise, Kayla cheated on my dad with her ex. So Tyler and I started dating again. Story time about how my mom got with my sister's boyfriend. So a little background information. I was 13 and in 8th grade, and my sister was a senior in high school and she was 17. And my sister always had a new boyfriend. Like after 3 months of dating somebody, they would break up and then she would be with a new guy a month later. And this started whenever she was a sophomore. So yeah, she had a lot of boyfriends. Anyway, so she had started dating this boy, and we're gonna call him Ben. Well, lucky for Ben, whenever they started dating was right around the time when we were supposed to go on our vacation that we take every year. So my mom and dad said that he could come with us. So my sister, who we're gonna call Emily, she decided to bring Ben, and I decided to bring one of my friends, Carly. We drove down, everything was good for the first 2 days, and usually what would happen on this vacation is my dad would end up staying at the hotel and doing work while we were all out doing stuff. So my mom, Ben, and Emily were all out drinking at the bar 24/7. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my mom got with my sister's boyfriend. So like I said, Emily, Ben, and my mom were out drinking 24/7 at the bar. And since this was a vacation that we took every year, my sister already knew a bunch of people down there. The one night my mom started feeling really sick at the bar, so Ben offered to take her back to the hotel. And at this time, my friend, my dad, and I were all down at the buffet in the hotel. So Ben took my mom upstairs to our hotel room, and my dad was like, oh, do you guys want to walk down to the fair? We said yes, so he told us to go upstairs and get his wallet. So my friend and I go up in the elevator to our room, and I want to say this was about 20 or 30 minutes after Ben and my mom had went upstairs. So we get into the room, we hear the shower running, which was weird because we didn't think anybody was there. So instead of me calling my dad because it might have been a murderer, I go, and the door slightly creaked open, so I look through the door, and obviously I could hear you know what, but hers and his clothes were on the floor. Like for part 3. Part 3 about how my mom got with my sister's boyfriend. So like I said, obviously we could hear stuff. We saw their clothes on the floor, so I took a video and I took a picture. But obviously you couldn't see anything. And I didn't want to tell my dad first. So my best friend and I, we went downstairs, we went to the carnival. And when my sister got back, she ended up getting back with Ben because obviously after he was done, he went back to my sister. I know this is confusing, but try to keep up. So I asked my sister if she can pretty please take me and my friend down to the pool to go swimming. So my sister came down with us, and then I was like, I have to tell you something. So then I ended up showing her the photos and the videos, and at this point, she's like, what the fuck? So surprisingly, without choking this man to death, she goes upstairs, she goes to sleep, and then the next morning, she goes and has a talk with my mom. So my mom, my sister, my friend, and I, we all sat down at the buffet in the morning and had breakfast. And my dad and Ben weren't there. Well, long story short, my mom ended up saying, it's not fair that you bring all these young guys around me, da-da-da-da-da. Are you really gonna break up our family because of this? And till this day, my dad still does not know about it. Story time about how somebody stole my $12,000 dog at a house party. So a little background information, I was 17 and a junior in high school, and I decided to throw a party at my house before winter break. So usually whenever I threw parties, I would always have everybody in the basement because I had a pretty big basement. There was a sliding glass door to the outside, so nobody had to go upstairs to get in or get out. And I would always lock the door to the upstairs just in case anybody decided to wander up the stairs. And because I didn't think anybody would get in upstairs, I let my dogs run around the house. So everybody who I invited showed up, and I guess that my address got leaked because a bunch of random people started showing up at my house. And it's not like I didn't have neighbors. No, I lived in a very tight cul-de-sac. So people were parking in front of my neighbors' driveways, in my neighbors' driveways. So I called my parents, and eventually I had to have my neighbors call the cops on my house party. My own party. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how somebody stole my $12,000 dog at my house party. So like I said, I had to call my parents, and they got the cops called on the house so that way I could get everybody that I did not know out of the freaking house. Thankfully, my friends and I hadn't started drinking yet because literally 5 minutes after my friends showed up, random people started showing up in big groups. So after everybody clears out, I go to walk upstairs and I have my keys in my hand ready to unlock the door. The door was literally busted open. Like somebody had to have kicked the doorknob because the frame was cracked, the door was cracked, it was bad. So I'm freaking out. I wasn't even thinking about my dog at the time until my friend Kirsten asked to see my new puppy. Because Kirsten had just got home from college and she had only ever seen the dog over FaceTime. So we're searching all over the house and we cannot find my fucking dog. Well, when my parents got home that night, they pretty much grounded me for life. But then I want to say a month later, my friend Jake, who was there that night, called me freaking the fuck out. Like for part 3. Part 3 about how my $12,000 dog got stolen at my house party. So like I said, we couldn't find Mimi. My parents pretty much grounded me for life. I get a call from my friend Jake, who was there that night of the night of the party. And he's like flipping out. He's like, I think I know who took Mimi, aka my dog. So I'm like freaking out. I go into the kitchen, I put him on speakerphone so that way my parents can hear. And he was like, well, my girlfriend Avery has this one girl who was at the party that night on Snapchat. And I was like, okay, and what the fuck about it? And he was like, well, the one night we were laying in bed together and she was going through people's Snapchat stories and then she got onto this girl's private story. And I told her, that's my friend's dog, the one that got stolen. So then we looked her up on Instagram, we went on her Visco, and she has a crap ton of pictures of your dog on her Visco. So somehow his girlfriend Avery finds this girl's address. My parents were like, oh, we want to call the police. Somehow I talked them out of doing that. Long story short, I went to her house, I got my dog back after telling her parents about it, but when I was leaving, I ran over her.
Am I the asshole for sabotaging my brother's wedding? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. My brother and his, fiance, they've been together for 4 years and engaged for 6 months. I hate her. I hate her so much. She is the most entitled woman I've ever met, and she thinks that she deserves everything. Her parents are super, super rich. Now, my family isn't poor, but we're definitely not as rich as her. She demands that my brother pay for everything. Like all of their rent, all of their car payments, every single thing. My brother doesn't make a lot of money, and this stresses him out a lot. Her dad offered to give my brother money so that he could basically pay for everything while she thinks that my brother actually paid for it. Even her parents know how terrible she is. She's also extremely jealous. She barely lets my brother do anything, and he's basically shut out all of his friends just to not make her angry if he wants to go out with them. This is the worst part. I walked in on her and her friends talking crap about my brother. They were all a little bit tipsy, so she wasn't measuring what she was saying. Even when I came into the room, she still kept talking trash about him. Being the good sister that I am, I grabbed her drink and threw it in her face. Now my brother's not really talking to me. Part 2 is up. Part 2, am I the asshole for sabotaging my brother's wedding? After I threw the drink in her face, my brother stopped talking to me. He finally heard me out and I told him everything I thought about her. And when I told him that she was talking trash behind his back, he told me that she does that all the time with her friends, and that it's just a way for her to vent. I explained to him that she should have nothing but good things to say about him. She doesn't sound like she loves him when she talks about him. By the way, she was telling her friends that my brother was basically a good for nothing, and that he didn't earn enough money for her to actually live a good life with him. Because of this, I started sabotaging the wedding, in small little ways. For example, I know exactly what dress she wanted, so I called the store and ordered all of them. They're currently out of stock. She went berserk. My brother had to calm her down for like an hour. When I finally apologized for throwing the drink in her face, she asked me to help with the wedding. So she gave me the job of sending invitations. So I decided not to send any to her family. When she asked me about it, I told her I sent all the invitations, that they probably got lost in the mail. We all went out to dinner that night with her family and mine. She threw a whole tantrum at the restaurant. She was demanding attention. And of course, everyone was comforting her. She's a total bridezilla. Even her best friend told me that she can't stand her anymore. She also told me I couldn't invite any of my friends because we're all too artsy. Now I need your help to come up with more sabotages, because it's actually working. My brother is finally getting sick of her. He told my parents he's not sure he wants to marry her anymore. My hope is that they break up soon. I just want my brother to be happy. What do you think I should do? Story time about how I've been in love with my best friend for 6 years. This is not my story time, it's sending me an Instagram. Let's call my best friend Rick. Rick and I have known each other since we were 3 years old. We're actually neighbors and we went to the same school, grew up at the same time, and we did everything together as kids. Most people thought we were siblings. His mom became my mom's best friend, and our parents would go to dinner almost every single week. Growing up, we treated each other like siblings. He always watched out for me and had my back when we were in school. But things started to change when we got into high school. Rick started dating a lot of the girls in school. Suddenly, I started to get really jealous. Instead of spending time with me, he would start spending time with his new girlfriends, duh. But we would always go to school together, and instead, he started dropping off and picking up his own girlfriend. So I didn't have a ride to school anymore. Instead, my dad would take me to school. We would always hang out after class and on the weekends. So you can understand this was a huge change for me. At first, I thought I was just jealous because I was losing my best friend. But when I told my mom, she asked me if I was in love with him. At first, I was like, no freaking way. But then I became even more jealous. I was always angry with him for hanging out with his girlfriends. I started missing him so much, and I couldn't stop thinking about him. I was constantly checking if he was home or not. I would simply look out the window and see that his car wasn't there. I played it off as much as I could when I would see him. We all happened to go to a party and his girlfriend was there with him. Out of nowhere, she taps me on the shoulder and asked me if I'm in love with Rick. I didn't know what to say. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I've been in love with my best friend for 6 years. This is not my story time, it's sending me an Instagram. At the party, his girlfriend asked me if I'm in love with him. I actually froze and didn't say anything. Then she got right up in my face and asked me again. I answered no and basically ran away from the party. When I got home, I got a text from Rick asking me if I was okay. I told him I was just tired and I wasn't having fun at the party. Then he sends me a screenshot of messages his girlfriend sent him. In the messages, she told him that she thought I was in love with him and that she could tell just by the way that I looked at him. He told her there was no way and that I was just a sister to him. He actually thought it was hilarious that she would think that. God, if only he knew that it was true. He then told me that he needed to stay away from me just to not make her jealous. This hurt me so much. He was choosing her over me. She actually ended up cheating on him and they broke up. A few years passed by and during that time I dated other people, but I couldn't stop thinking about Rick. Guess what I did? I moved 2 cities away just to avoid him. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I've been in love with my best friend for 6 years. After I moved away just to try to forget him, it did not work. I just couldn't stop thinking about him. After a year, I moved back to my hometown. I decided I would be honest with Rick and tell him how I really feel about him. Well, it's been a year since I moved home and I still haven't told him anything. Girls fall over themselves just to try to date him. And everyone he's ever dated literally looks like a model. And I know that I can't compete with that. Now, I know I'm not ugly or anything, but I'm definitely not the model type. I decided to open up to Rick's mom and I told her how I felt. She's actually really happy that I told her the truth. And she told me that she always suspected it. She also told me she would love Rick and I to date. I told her that I just didn't have the courage to tell him how I really felt. I mean, imagine you going up to your crush and telling them that you like them. It's so hard. She also told me Rick wants to get married soon and finally settle down. Apparently, he's sick of dating around. So basically, he's looking for a wife. I don't want to sit on the sidelines and watch him with somebody else the rest of my life. I just can't muster up the courage to tell him. Rick and I had dinner a few nights ago, and he told me that he actually likes someone from his job. I almost started crying right then and there in front of him. I'm hoping he doesn't ask her out. I want to find a way to tell him without me dying of embarrassment. If you have any ideas, please let me know. Or maybe I just shouldn't tell him at all. Maybe I can find someone else. What do you think? Storytime about how my boyfriend forces me to follow his rules in order to be his girlfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. I sent him on Instagram. We've been together for 2 years now. I feel like everyone says this, but the relationship was really good at the beginning. For the first 6 months, everything was totally fine. We had a lot of fun together. We would go out on double dates with all of our friends. We even started our own business together. After he asked me to move in with him is when everything became a nightmare. A little backstory on him. His parents didn't really care about his hygiene or their house when he was growing up. He tells me that his house was really messy, that their house was never taken care of, and that his mom is pretty much a hoarder. Now, I don't know if any of this is true, because he doesn't speak to his parents anymore, so I'm assuming that it is. He told me that as a kid, he used to feel really ashamed of people coming over to his house, and that he would always be cleaning up after his parents. As you can imagine, now that he's an adult, he controls everything around him. His apartment is perfect. He lives in a high-rise and his apartment is beautiful. I should say our apartment, but everything is always clean and perfect. And if it's not like that, he gets in a really bad mood. I'm talking super angry. He's never become physical, but sometimes I think he wants to. This is when the rules started. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my boyfriend forces me to follow his rules in order to be his girlfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent him on Instagram. After I moved in with him and realized how much of a clean freak he is, he started implementing some rules. At first, he just said it very casually. For example, he asked me not to touch his clothes. In other words, he never wanted me to do his laundry or even fold them for him. When I went into his closet, he had a very meticulous way of putting everything away. All of his drawers were labeled. He had specific mugs for coffee. By mistake, I used a different type of mug and he actually threw that mug away. He said that it was probably going to get stained and there was no point in keeping it. When I asked him why he was so specific about all these things, he told me his anxiety would act up if I didn't do these things. So I did exactly what he wanted me to do. After a few weeks of me moving in, he handed me this booklet. In it, he had typed out all of the house rules, also a section that said girlfriend rules. For example, he didn't like me wearing short skirts. He didn't like me having long nails. He didn't like when I wore my hair in a bun. Also, if we were out with people, he would only let me sit on his left side, because that's his better side. After a few days of me trying to follow the rules, I accidentally broke one. I forgot to use a coaster on the coffee table and he ended up kicking me out that day. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how my boyfriend forces me to follow his rules in order to be his girlfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I sent him on Instagram. After he kicked me out for not using a coaster of all things, I went straight to my parents' house. When I told my parents about the booklet, they thought he was legitimately crazy. A few days later, he begged me to go back and I did. He even added new things to the list. For example, I have to clean the air fryer every single time I use it. There can be no dirty dishes in the kitchen at any time. And when it comes to the girlfriend rules, he bought me a perfume that he really likes and I hate it. But I can't say no to wearing it because he gets angry. He also doesn't want me bringing any of my friends over. My best friend forgot to recycle a pizza box the last time she was at our place, and ever since then he talks trash about her. I know I should leave him, but I still do love him, and I really think that he needs help. But I have started looking for my own apartment. I live by those stupid rules and I'm terrified of breaking one. My hair has even started falling out because of it. What should I do?
Mother-in-law offered to breastfeed my 2-week-old son. Apparently, there's some injection that can make a woman start lactating again. My husband and I were mortified that she had the nerve to even suggest such a thing. My husband has 3 siblings that all have kids, and she did not offer this to any of them. Why me? Good question. Why? Because I want to know why she wants to do this so bad. Dated an ex-Muslim who a year later admitted that he never left Islam and said hopefully me and his baby would be unalive during childbirth due to me not being a Muslim. Can anyone explain? A year into our relationship, I became pregnant. He then revealed he never left Islam, that he felt unable to let me give birth to his child because he said, as a woman who allowed me to have sex with her without us being married, you are dirty. He said he never really cared about me at all and was only dating me because he couldn't afford to hire escorts and that he had no choice but to pretend to love me, otherwise I refused to do the deed with him. Finally, he threatened to sue me for refusing to have an abortion and then went to Morocco and married a young girl over there after meeting her just 4 or 5 times. His last words to me were that he hoped that me and the baby would be unalive during childbirth and that if I ever told his family, British Pakistani, about having his baby, he'd call the police for harassment. Me and my baby survived, but what the fuck? I'm in therapy because of all this, but still feel traumatized. Can anyone explain?
Why I'm gonna let my future kids wear whatever they want? Storytime edition. I feel like some people were confused and some people weren't, but some people were confused. When I was a kid, I loved skateboarding. I wanted nothing more than be a professional skateboarder like Tony Hawk. I would wear my dad's clothes, I would wear my old brother's clothes, and I would just do anything. I had been begging for a skateboard, and when I finally got it, I didn't think that I could ride it without the proper attire. So when it was time to get my new shirt at Walmart, I did look through the girls section. Did I find what I wanted? No, I didn't. However, when I peeked over to the boys section, I saw a red shirt with white and blue stripes, and I thought, that's the coolest shirt I've ever seen. So what I did is when I grabbed it, I folded it up, took it to the girls section, put it underneath some butterfly shirts, and then made sure my mom was in like the peripheral area, pulled it out and showed it to her. Look where I got this. I don't think she bought it, but she did buy the shirt. Well, I'm gonna let my future kids wear whatever they want. Part 2. Okay, this is more of the why. Listen, do I dress like a little skater boy anymore? Sometimes. But the point is, I grew, I evolved, my style has evolved. Do I still shop in the boys section? Absolutely. 100%, that is not a joke. But I feel if I'm gonna be like Miss Feminist, Miss Equality, whatever, then boys should be allowed to do the same. I think a boy should be allowed to peek over at the girls section, see a shirt with a butterfly, a creature, a literal animal, and be like, oh, that's a cool shirt, and wear it. There should not be a problem with flowers. There should not be a problem with butterflies. Why some animals and plants are deemed more girly, I don't. Marketing, capitalism, I don't know, guys. Actually, I do know it's that. It's what I just said. I just think it's unfair for me to be like, oh, let me browse through the boys section, enjoy, and if the guys do it, it's like, have you seen the boys section? It's sad. They would look amazing in ruffles. They just would. And more color.
Storytime about how I'm still engaged after 16 years. My fiance asked me to marry him when I was 20 years old and I am now 36. It's been that long. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime of sending me an Instagram. Let's call my fiance Ted. Ted is a great guy, aside from the fact that he pushes back our wedding date all the time. A little backstory. We are both very career-driven people. We both work very hard and travel for our jobs. He works on Wall Street and I work for a beauty conglomerate. We're very wealthy, so we could be having kids right now if we wanted to. But of course, he says that we should wait until we get married. Every time I bring up the fact that we still haven't gotten married after 16 years, he gets annoyed and upset. Worst of all, we barely spend time together because we both work so much. Have to interrupt. This foundation is amazing, you guys. Where are my pores? It's from the brand Assam Beauty and it is cruelty-free. I don't think my skin has ever looked this good in makeup. Back to the story. I started getting really suspicious because of how many times he's pushed back the wedding. So I decided to do some research. When we first got engaged, he told me the ring was worth $45,000. I got it appraised and it turns out it's a fake ring and it's only worth $200. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I'm still engaged after 16 years. After I found out the ring was fake, I came up with a plan to confront my fiance. I made sure to get home earlier than he did. When he came into the apartment, I was standing right by our balcony. He comes over to me and gives me a kiss. Then I take off the engagement ring and I throw it over the balcony. He pretended like he was freaking out. That's when I told him I got the ring appraised and that it was a fake, and that it was only worth $200 instead of the $45,000 he told me he spent. The man was too stunned to speak. I could tell he was trying to come up with some lie in his head, so I gave him a minute to think. Then he says that he bought the ring from a friend who's a jeweler, and that he must have scammed him out of the $45,000. After 45 minutes of arguing, I was exhausted. I decided to go to sleep. I woke up a few hours later and I overhear him on the phone. That's when I heard him say she knows that the ring is fake and I think she knows about us. Part 3 is up. This palette is also from Amazon Beauty and it's cruelty-free. These shadows blend like a dream. Go to part 3. Part 3 of how I'm still engaged after 16 years. That's when I hear my fiance on the phone saying I think she knows about us. My heart sank to my stomach. I stood there and listened to the rest of the conversation. He was whispering so it was hard to make out. All I could hear was, I'll have to tell her the truth now. I went back to our room and pretended to be asleep. He comes in and wakes me up and tells me that he has to talk to me. That's when he starts telling me everything. He said when he asked me to marry me, he had every intention of doing so. But the more he traveled, the further he felt away from me. That's when he told me he met someone in his travels and that he'd been seeing this woman for 10 years. He even had a house with her in a different city. It turns out that every time he would travel, it was only to see her. My world was completely shattered. Worst of all is that he was so happy after he told me. He moved out that week and now I am totally alone. I gave him the best years of my life and my time was totally wasted. I feel like he should be punished for this, but I don't think he broke any laws. What should I do? The mascara and lip balm are also from Amazon Beauty. How good does my skin look? Bye!
So in 1808, these two guys got in a duel in hot air balloons, which were really full of gas at that time. But anyway, they got in a duel in hot air balloons over this one lady, and it was kind of amazing. So obviously, the question is why Monsieur de Grand Prix and Monsieur de Pique basically were dating the same chick. Her name was Mademoiselle Trivette, and basically she was trifling. She had a thing going with both dudes, and when they found out, they were like, I still want her. So a duel it is. But since they were gentlemen, they were like, let's have an extra gentlemanly duel. And that's where the idea of integrating the hot air balloons came from. So whenever you have a duel, you basically have this guy who's a second, and he comes and he makes sure that like everyone follows the proper rules of the duel, and like if you die, he knows what to tell your family about like who gets what, blah 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 blah. So the guys ready for this like extra refined duel got in their baskets and they went up in the air. They allegedly, according to the reports, like the news reports of the time, they reached 2,700 feet before anybody was like allowed to fire. So one guy was allowed to fire first. Like I don't know how they decided this pecking order, but one guy was allowed to fire first, and he fired first and he fucking missed. And like keep in mind the goal was really more to hit the balloon than hit the man, because like obviously you hit the balloon, the man's gonna like die. So I don't know how he missed a whole balloon, but that's really a question he should be asking himself. Anyway, Monsieur de Grand Prix is second, so he fires his shot. He hits the fucking balloon, because gee shit. Anyway, what ends up happening is obviously the balloon crashes, and the man and his second are described as having been bashed to pieces on this random farmhouse. Now, I have a couple questions, and there are no answers from what I've been able to see to these two questions, so we can all just speculate together. But one, did she go for it after this? Did she pick him? Nobody published if she did, so I feel like she probably didn't, but like maybe she did. And I don't know about you, but like a whole hot air balloon duel, if he wanted to, he would. Second, whose fucking house was that he got bashed to pieces on? Did they get reimbursements? What happened there? Because I have to imagine like shingles fell off, right? Like at the very least.